Okay, welcome back. So you should have at this point already answered Journal 3 in your quarter four humanities like Google Doc. So Journal 3, hopefully you already have an answer. If you haven't done that, I'd say pause this video, go check out the first video, answer the question in your journals, and then come tune into this afterwards. So if you have finished it up, here's kind of my take on this very controversial issue. And I know this is one I thank you guys, especially everybody in class and those that I've corresponded with. This is kind of a touchy, like sensitive subject, and it's one that you have to have a little bit of maturity to discuss it too, because there can be a lot of snickers but at the same time, I think it's a very important like ethical and moral question, and it's something that should get careful consideration because this is a pretty important policy decision that can have a lot of ramifications. Now, my take, and know that this is just my take, I don't care what your stance is on it. You could argue that prostitution should be legal or illegal. I respect all opinions on this, and I definitely can see people that disagree with me on this. I think they often have very valid points, but this is just kind of my take on it. So don't take it with a grain of salt. It's nothing more, nothing less than just kind of my personal and biased opinion that I'd have on it. Now, I can say I've never been a prostitute. To my knowledge, nobody in my family's ever been a prostitute, and I've never visited one or done anything like that. So, not that I would guess any of you would have thought that, but I'll just say I feel like I have no dog in this fight because even if it was to be made legal, I'm a family man. I don't see myself partaking in it, but I think it's a very important moral and ethical question, like I said, that should be wrestled with because it does affect kind of a lot of people out in society. And there are sex workers out there that have to operate in kind of a black market system. And I look at it, my bias is I generally, for issues like this, I lean to a libertarian point of view, which I've tried not to incorporate too much politics in this class because I know a lot of kids your age, you can't vote yet, and a lot of people are not tuned in politics, sometimes never in your life, but often not until you're at least up to voting age and paying taxes. A libertarian is somebody that basically really, really puts a lot of emphasis on individual rights and personal responsibility. So looking at it through that lens, I kind of feel like, I mean, if there is a drive out there and people are interested in either being a prostitute or visiting prostitutes, it's going to happen no matter what the state policy is. And I would compare it to something that's different, but kind of the same, like policies on drug use or on certain illegal substances or even alcohol. We tried to ban alcohol in this country back during the Prohibition days from 1920 to 1933. If you've had my U.S. history class, we talked about that. How did that work out? Well, it didn't really cause anybody to stop drinking. I think it had very noble intentions. The people that were behind the driving force to passing that prohibition law, they wanted to cut down on drunkenness and family abuse, and it was seen as a pro-family piece of legislation that would, make dads more responsible, and there'd be less wives and children getting beaten and stuff. However, it really didn't cut down on the level that people were drinking, and people basically still consumed alcohol at the same rate. Now they're just doing it illegally and buying it from gangsters and bootleggers like Al Capone. So it had a lot of unintended consequences too. Like it led to a huge spike in illegal activity and organized crime. So prohibition didn't work good, and then eventually it gets repealed, and then you have laws like how we have today, where alcohol is controlled substance. The government taxes it more heavily, but it's out there and available because we kind of realized that's something you can't really legislate away. If people have a drive to do it, they're going to do it no matter what the law says. So we might as well just try to legislate it and make it as safe as possible for most people out there. Also, I think like I almost never drink alcohol. I think it's a very destructive thing. If we get into a war on drugs unit, I would say, I think the stats back me up on this, that alcohol is the most dangerous drug in the world. It causes more pain, suffering, and death than anything else out there. Heroin, cocaine, meth, any of those included. Yet it's still is legal, and I think it should be legal, even though I don't have really any interest in consuming it, because I look at it as a personal responsibility type issue that you should have the freedom to do what you want with your freedom as long as it doesn't affect me and it doesn't infringe on other people's freedom. So that's kind of how I look at like the alcohol or drug issue, that it should be more personal responsibility and adults should be able to engage in those kind of activities or consume what they want. I feel the same way essentially for prostitution, that I think it's probably not a great career. I don't have any daughters. I do have sons. I can say I wouldn't want anybody in my family to choose that as a career or profession. I would discourage students from taking that, even if it was a like in the future. I mean, once you're out in adult world, even if it was legal, I would still say, hi, I think you can do better. But I also, down to my core, feel like once you're an adult, obviously, it shouldn't be allowed alcohol or others for little kids or anything like that, or younger people that are developing. But I do feel like once you're an adult, once we, whatever age we set it at 18 or 19 or 21, I feel like you should have the freedom to do basically whatever you want to do until it starts to infringe on my freedom or other people's freedoms out there, and you're using your freedom negatively against them. So if that makes sense, that's kind of the lens I view it through. I think you can tie in individual rights and human rights, and I know there's strong arguments that would kind of break away from my opinion and say you get worse outcomes if you allow it. But I kind of look at it pragmatically, just like the alcohol issue. That, you know what, when alcohol was banned, you had a lot of people making it illegally in bathtubs and stuff and smuggling it in. And there were actually quite a few incidents of people getting batches of alcohol that had been tainted and not prepared correctly. And people were going blind or they were poisoning themselves accidentally. You see that today with heroin, where most people that die in OD on heroin, it's not the heroin that gets them, it's the fentanyl it's cut with. Now, for that one, if it was legal and it went through and was kind of like government inspectors went through the facility and there was truth in labeling and you were buying it from a reputable source, that would really cut down on people poisoning themselves with alcohol, right? Because you can go buy it legally at a store. I think in theory it would do the same for like heroin and harder drugs, because you wouldn't be buying it on the black market and you wouldn't know sometimes what's in it. I think the same logic in my mind applies to like prostitution too. That even if you are a prostitute and you're operating illegally and you're worried about the police catching you and stuff, I feel like those prostitutes are at a much, much higher risk for being abused. When we saw the movie Taken, you saw some of those girls that were prostitutes in Paris, and the main character is trying to track down his daughter. Well, who do those girls report to? They basically had a guy that managed them and like would smack them around and take their money. And I mean, that's a terrible situation. If you're a prostitute, to me it seems like you would rather function in a legal system where you're actually like paying taxes and you're not forced into it, and there are government regulations that would kind of give you some safeguards and protections. If you looked at some of the other countries around the world that do have it legalized, typically they have regulations where it's like they have to get STI checks. They make sure that the condoms are used in there, and they take other safety precautions. They also would have inspectors come in some places where they're going to check with these girls and see, is anybody forcing you to do this? Are you doing it against your will? To me, it seems like if it's going to happen no matter what, and there's a market for it, we would rather try to regulate it and make it as safe as possible for as many people as possible that want to engage in that activity. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. But I get too that like opinions really vary on that, and a lot of people for moral, ethical, or other religious reasons would disagree with me. And I say to each his own. I think we need more honest, open discussions for all kinds of policy, rather than just kind of jumping in your tribe and arguing the other way. So hopefully my response makes sense. If you have any questions or want any follow-up conversation, by all means hit me up and reach out to me. Take care, have a great week.